Good morning. Welcome to Zen Glop, the podcast, music and meditation. I'm thinking of rebranding just a little bit. I usually start with music, poetry, and psychogeography, but I realize nobody really knows or cares about the psychogeography part. And what I'm most interested in talking about is that overlay of meditation practice and creativity, whether it's music or poetry. So, just talking out loud right now. Let me know if you have any thoughts. Drop a note, zenglop@gmail.com, or go to the website, zenglop.net, and subscribe. These episodes come out Tuesdays and Thursdays. All right. So with that out of the way, I'm still thinking a lot about the head-tailed cat image that Alan Watts put forward as a useful analog for non-duality. Talked about it a bit last week, and it's really stayed with me because it's a really good articulation of what non-duality means, I think, or at least it's a definition of non-duality that has resonated with me recently. So we have two opposites, in this case, a head and a tail on a cat. And there's a way in which you can see the head and not the tail, and then you can see the tail and not the head. And you might even think that the tail is caused by the head, when in fact it is two aspects of the same cat, the head-tailed cat. And he uses the formulation head-tailed cat to get across the idea that they are both necessary attributes, actions, components of the singular cat. They aren't opposites. There is not a head and a tail, and then the non-dual view is to see that head and tail are the same thing. So with non-duality, the separation between, let's say, phenomena and experience, my experience of that phenomena, my emotions, my reactions, appear to be caused by an external stimulus, an external input, when in fact they are cause emotion, stimulus emotion. That it's two parts of the same object. The object is how would we put it? If we would try to follow the model of the head-tailed cat, we would call it the anger feel, or the statement anger, right? Maybe someone says something that makes me that makes me feel anger. The words that we use suggest that the statement occurs. There's some passage of information between the external world and my nervous system, and then I react with anger. When in fact, the first premise is that there's a singular creation that is both statement and reaction. And then the duality of that is removed not by saying that the statement and the anger are the same, or indeed not by saying that the statement and the anger don't exist, but by saying that the statement and the anger are part of the intuitive inclination for manifestation. It's not particularly good language either. But I think that's why we end up saying things like head-tailed cat. So the first step towards this residence within non-duality is to recognize the fallacy of cause and effect, and to recognize that those things that we think are the effect of causes are actually an attribute of the same issue, the same item. And then from there we can analyze the nature of that singular entity, and we can perceive its emptiness, and we can perceive the luminosity and clarity that comes from that awareness. I like it. I find it very useful. It fits in with another image that has been present with me and has been part of my practice lately, which is the sine wave, the idea of a sine wave. And a sine wave that has behaved a certain way in the past is behaving a certain way in the immediate moment, and is likely to behave that way in the future until some point when it won't. And then when it doesn't, what that reveals is a different frequency. So let me explain what I'm saying. When I breathe, there's an inhale and an exhale. This is also very much influenced by the Alan Watts reading. Very good explanation or statement that when you have a wave, if you take the trough out, you don't have a wave, you have a flat line. And we assume that the positive side of the sine wave is existence and the negative side is nothing, when in fact the +1 and the -1 of the sine wave are both part of the head-tailed cat. And so our task, one of them, if we choose to think of it this way in our meditation practice, is to maintain equilibrium through the peak and the trough of the sine wave. And not to sort of assume that the trough of the sine wave is non-existence, death, emptiness in the nihilistic sense of, not just empty of form, but truly the sort of culturally common definition of nothing. But we can see that doesn't make sense, right? I breathe in, that's maybe my +1. I breathe out, and then I'm down at the -1 of the sine wave. A sine wave with an amplitude of 1. And then there's a pause at the trough, and there's an interesting part of the practice to extend that pause. The pause between the inhalation and the exhalation. I'm not really saying holding the breath. Holding the breath at the peak is good practice, good exercise, good energy, good focus, good concentration. But it's a different experience when you've exhaled completely. And then it's almost as if there's an actual pause of all activity, a cessation of breathing. And I find for myself that re-engaging with the in-breath is a point where I often wobble. Do you know, like I feel my mindfulness shake a little bit, like the motion of starting to breathe in again is one that is subtle but real in terms of diverting attention. So there's a practice that I like where can I maintain good equanimity, good focus through the pause at the end of the exhalation before the begin of the inhalation. That practice wouldn't exist if I didn't think that the trough existed. It's kind of same on the smaller side of the spectrum. Then there's a point where thoughts arise, I'm aware of my thoughts. Maybe I'm maintaining a sufficient level of equanimity within my sitting practice that I can really start to see the thoughts and really start to scrutinize, be aware of the nature of those thoughts. Most of the time, my thoughts are a constant stream, a waterfall of ideas and fantasies. And the point in my practice right now is to see them as separate from the mind in which they reside. If that makes sense. I love the image of a mountain sort of wreathed in fog and surrounded by birds. And my seated pose is the mountain, and the thoughts are the birds and the clouds. They're not going anywhere, but they are separate from the mountain. But there are moments where there's a temporary reduction in the quantity of birds and fog, and I can see individual birds. And then there's times when there may not be a bird at all. And that's also a point to... It's like the moment before the inhalation, where the necessity of equanimity will see through that point. And then another thought arises, and hopefully doesn't push the mindfulness off kilter completely. So we have the thoughts, and then we have the sine wave of the breath. We have the sine wave of waking and sleeping. I'm very much thinking about this right now because the practice of maintaining equanimity, awareness, lucidity is the word that we use in Western psychology. Lucidity through the dream state is something I'm trying to bring into my practice now. I've tried dream yoga, the Tibetan practice of dream yoga before, quite a while ago, with no success. I mean, definitely an increase in the clarity of my dreams and in my recall of the dreams, and that's great. Useful to observe in retrospect the content of the dream, but I've never had any success in waking within the dream or recognizing that I'm dreaming during the dream, and that's entirely because my natural state of equanimity hasn't been sufficient. But I'm feeling right now that this is an exercise that I am ready to take on, but also that I need to take on, because the confidence of mastering equanimity through the sleep state is, I think, a real step. Like, I'm asking myself the question, if I prove myself capable of maintaining consciousness through the transition from wake to sleep on a daily basis, I am at least able to comprehend the ideas of maintaining consciousness in the transition from consciousness to death. And this is a great exploration, right? This is a great question. This is a large hypothesis that demands to be tested. And so I am approaching a lot of my practice right now with that view. Here is a question framed for me right now by that Alan Watts book. But it's testable. Anyway, good for today. Check back in with you on Tuesday of next week. Again, like, subscribe, And definitely send a question if you have any comments, criticisms, and the like, zengloff@gmail.com.